Seems like this is top of mind as you are going to enter any store or business, without knowing what's on the other side of the door.
That's just it. And the hard thing is that business owners, especially if it's like a fake service animal, which is a whole different thing, but like animals being introduced into a business can lead to access refusals for service animal handlers.
Welcome to the Disability Rights Montana podcast. Today, we are going to explore some ideas around transportation for the disability community. And with me today, I have Jacob from the National Federation of the Blind of Montana. Thanks for being with us, Jacob.
Definitely.
Do you want to go ahead and tell folks who you are and what you do?
Sure, I'd love to. My name's Jacob Krisovich. I'm from Helena, Montana, and I'm a part of the National Federation of the Blind of Montana. I say of Montana because it's an affiliate. So National Federation of the Blind is a nationwide organization. It's the largest organization and the oldest organization for for advocating for the blind. They have an affiliate in almost every one of the 50 states, and actually, I believe like Puerto Rico has one. They have a pretty wide reach. So each state has an affiliate and they're responsible for advocating for the blind within their state. So they do have access to national resources. Our whole mission and goal is to advocate for the blind, whether that's through blind and low vision, whether that's through direct advocacy in terms of attending meetings on, alongside of the person who's blind or low vision, whether that's employment or school. We'll meet alongside them to help advocate for them. And then also we do things at the state level, local level, and national level in terms of legislation and trying to either protect our existing rights or expand our rights.
And maybe you can tell us a little bit about your role over the next several months.
Yeah.
Montana's state legislature goes into session first week of January. You have an important role there regarding session. I would tell folks about what your role there is and what you're hoping to accomplish as we move forward.
The area that I oversee is advocacy and public policy. So it's not just legislation, it's also public policy and just advocacy in general. But what we're focusing on currently is the legislative session, as you referenced, is going to be starting up here in January. So currently, two things that we're looking at, we're working on getting sponsors for, getting bill text for, things like that, are electronic ballot return system. And so currently, Montana allows individuals with disabilities to electronically request their ballot. So that means that you can get an electronic version that you can fill out. It's a fillable PDF.
People may have seen that. It's on the Secretary of State's website, and it's called EBRS, Electronic Ballot Request System.
Exactly. Yes. And the Secretary of State's office has a whole section of their website dedicated to voters with disabilities. So, you can find that information that Kona's talking about on there. And so you can request that and then you can fill it out, but electronically, and it's all accessible for people who are blind and low vision, as well as, any other disability. But where the rub is, where the issue is that you have to print it off, sign it, fill out the envelope, mail it.
So the process is it's like halfway there.
Yes.
They got halfway there. It's been halfway for a while.
Yes. And ironically, the acronym would be still the same in terms of it's EBRS. Well, it stands for Electronic Ballot Request System in this situation. We want to change it to Electronic Ballot Return System. So you're right. They have half the process done. We just want the full process. We want to be able to submit it electronically, which some states do offer currently. And
Montana does have a tool and a process in place for people to submit ballots electronically who are out of the country. And so this is not it's not that far of an ask or a stretch.
Correct. So we're working on that currently. The other piece of legislation that we're working on is protections for service animals in terms of interference, attack, or theft. Currently, we don't have any systems in place for that. 47 other states already have these protections. We're one of 3 that don't. So we want to rectify that and just offer protections in that you would be entitled to compensation, restitution for any damages, lost wages, from, missing work, any medical bills that, like needing to go through counseling. It's a traumatic event to go through that. So anyways, those are what we're pursuing.
Yeah. And I think that in a legislative sense, no one really runs on the platform of disability.
Yes.
And disability is an identity that crosses all people, whether doesn't matter what political party you are a part of. It doesn't matter what your racial background is. Doesn't matter where you grew up. It doesn't matter. I mean, your culture maybe calls it something different, or there are some cultures that say disability is a colonizer's word, and that's real too. But the concept of disability does exist across cultures and across people and identities. 29% of Montana adults self-identify as having some sort of disability. And so it is a large number of folks here in the state. David and I had a podcast episode about service animals. Neither of us use a service animal. I don't know if you want to take the opportunity to, you mentioned this idea of protections around your service animal, but maybe you could help us understand what it takes to have a service animal. What's the time commitment? Is it expensive? Do you want to, this might be a good opportunity just to talk about a service animal.
Definitely. Service animals are a major investment. And there's a couple different aspects to it. One, if you're blind or low vision, there are something like 11 guide dog schools across the United States where they'll train up the dog on your behalf. Or there's some people who do owner-trained service animals. The owner-trained service animals is at a much higher rate in the disabled community at large, excluding the blind and low vision. So if you get into wheelchair users, other things like that, some will still go through training organizations. Anyways, it costs the schools currently, what they say is it costs them $100,000 to train a dog, anywhere between $80,000 to $100,000 to train a guide dog, because the guide dogs trainings they tend to be the most intense, because you're talking about utilizing them for things like crossing traffic, navigating unsafe areas, train platforms, things like that, where the dog you're relying on them. They need to be tip top. So they tend to be the most expensive. On top of that, even if you own or train, it's a lot of time commitment. It takes between 1.5 years to 2 years to train these dogs. So whether it's the school doing it or yourself, it's a big time commitment, money and time that goes into it, even the front end of training them. And then once you have them, you build up your relationship with them. It's all the vet care, feeding, all those things. So if your animal goes through a traumatic event, like being attacked, you can lose your animal forever. So even if they survive it, say they don't die, and they're able to be treated by a veterinarian and they're all healthy again and everything, the damage psychologically can be irreparable.
Their ability to perform the tasks that they're trained to do may not ever be that same level or an appropriate level.
Yes.
And this is something that I experience, I'm sure you experience, is animals being in places that aren't service animals.
Oh, yes.
And, we're in Montana. If I go to a brewery or the hardware store or anywhere, there's always someone with a dog.
Yes.
And I don't know if you want to talk a bit about what that's like as a person who actually uses a service animal, and give us a little glimpse as to what that's like from the service animal handler side.
I'll start with the less severe, just distraction. You have this dog at a brewery. Breweries are a big one. That's an excellent example. But also sometimes stores where this other dog, somebody's pet, is not highly trained. So of course they want to, even if it's just a friendly dog, they want to play. So they're jumping out at your dog, trying to get them to play. And then it can make it hard as a service animal handler to utilize your dog. So trying to navigate to the door or a chair or navigate obstacles while there's other dogs. The other part is sometimes the dogs that people bring in, these pets, are aggressive. I had one just where the dog ripped the leash out of the owner's hand and came charging at Fife and I. Fife is my service animal. Came charging at us and snarling, snapping, and this was a larger dog, it wasn't that it was just trying to play. Like, this dog really wanted to hurt Fife. The only reason why it didn't happen was the owner last second stepped on the leash, and then the dog ripped the leash out of below the owner's foot, and then lunged for Fife again. It was inches from his face when the owner tackled his dog and pinned it down to the ground. So it's like one of those things where it's, at the very least, it's a distraction, and at the most, it can lend itself to a traumatic event, a dog attack, or even just, a traumatic event in terms of the stress of that situation.
And you use Fife often, as
Yes.
daily?
Daily.
Yeah. So this is something that comes up all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not that you're being attacked every day,
No.
but it is, as someone who is part of the blind and low vision community, it's something. It seems like this is top of mind as you are going to enter any store or business, without knowing what's on the other side of the door.
That's just it. And the hard thing is that business owners, especially if it's like a fake service animal, which is a whole different thing, but like animals being introduced into a business can lead to access refusals for service animal handlers. So like, it was the whole, a few weeks ago, National Federation of the Blind at the national level organized a rally in front of Uber and Lyft because of access refusals from drivers. So,
and this is specifically access refusals from drivers because you have an animal.
Yes, that's exactly it. So whether it's a guide dog or any other service animal, drivers it's 100% illegal. This is not a gray area. It is flat illegal to refuse somebody access to your Uber or Lyft or taxi due to a service animal. And that is exactly what happens. Is they'll show up and they'll even tell you point blank, no dogs, I don't take dogs. And you'll advocate, say that this is a service animal. This is not just a pet. I'm blind.
And did you, to go to California for the rally,
Yes.
Did you fly?
Yes.
I do have a question. Like, when you landed, did you call an Uber?
I did.
What about the rally? Can we just talk a little bit, like how energizing was that to be there?
Yeah.
Like, how many people showed up? Where'd they come from? You came from Montana.
Yes.
So yeah, what was that like? Who was there? And
it was super empowering. It was very energizing. The atmosphere there was just electric. It was incredible. So they had between 200 to 300 people show up. National Federation of the Blind. They had the American Council of the Blind, representatives from most of the major guide dog schools there, guide dog handlers. But there were other individuals that were there with either multiple disabilities or just a different disability entirely.
And are Uber and Lyft headquarters there?
Yes, they're both in San Francisco. Yes.
And so did you go to both? Did this group travel from one to the other?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we did. The morning was at Uber and the afternoon was at Lyft. Yeah, the energy was electric. We had chants, we had signs. They orchestrated a march in front of the organizations. They had speakers talking about the issue. It was electrifying. It was incredible.
Did you folks get any response from Uber or Lyft? Did anyone come out? Did anyone speak to you folks?
So, to my knowledge, Lyft didn't have anybody come out. Uber did have somebody come down. They didn't speak to us. They didn't address us as a collective, but they spoke with the president of our organization.
And so you're in California. You go to the rallies.
Yeah.
What is it like traveling around California or any, I guess you could maybe say like any other more urban setting as compared to traveling where you and I are both sitting right now in Helena, Montana? What are those differences for a person with a disability? Kind of talking about the local transportation options for a person with a disability.
Yeah. There's a lot more options. This was in San Francisco. So there's a lot more options. There's the ride shares that we discussed. Funny enough, ironically, while we were there, we did have somebody try to refuse us. Myself and another guide dog handler that I met there tried to refuse us. He even swore at us. But we ended up convincing him to take us and our dogs. The streetcars, obviously, they have the BART, which is like a monorail tram type situation. And that goes all over West Bay and East Bay. So you can take that. There is taxis, and then there's the good old fashioned walking. Navigating San Francisco, it's different obviously than the Montana cities just because it's a lot busier. The streets tend to be packed with a lot more traffic. They're a lot wider, bigger. But from an accessibility standpoint, accessibility is a lot better.
Let's compare this to Helena now.
Yes.
So let's start with walking, since that's where we ended. How is walking around Helena? So let's talk about Helena's sidewalks.
Yeah, or the lack thereof. Interestingly enough, I just worked with Montana Free Press. Just this last Monday, they had an article that they wrote, and we talked about this and that because I recently trained to do a half marathon. And so I had to run all over Helena with that, come across all parts of Helena and, or just walking around. And the issue is there's a severe lack of sidewalks. And the city of Helena does not have a substantive plan to increase that network. It's kind of one of those things where they're relying upon people to, if they do any major changes to their house or their business in terms of if they remodel, do an addition, things like that, then they have to put in a sidewalk.
And the sidewalk, there is a sidewalk program in Helena,
Yes.
but it's the bill comes to the owner.
Yes.
And the city does have like a interest-free
Yes.
program. You have to get on a list, but it gets it gets added to your taxes.
Yes.
And so, the neighborhood I live in, they're like 6th Avenue in Helena, they just redid all 6th Avenue. It's
Yes.
great, smooth.
Yes.
There's a lot of intersections that they redid. So exactly what you described with the domes, curb cuts, they all look great. However, once you leave that improved corner, the sidewalk quickly deteriorates.
Yes.
So there's this island of very pleasant, up-to-date, remodeled sidewalk. But once you leave that, it's pretty bumpy, at the least to say. Like, I don't know. There's some very large slabs of concrete not in place.
Frost upheavals. Yeah. And that's the thing is, and to Helena's credit, they have the interest-free loan program that you're talking about, where they tack it onto your taxes. You have to apply for it. But again, that's relying on people's like goodwill,
I mean, the sidewalk in front of my house is awful.
Yeah.
But it's not like I'm getting fined for it.
Yeah.
Like, it's just there. Like, and
that's just it.
And actually, the sidewalk in front of my house just ends. Like, it ends into grass, which happens a lot in Helena too. Like, the sidewalk will go along and then it just ends.
Yes.
And you're just on grass all of a sudden. And it's not consistent.
No. And that's the hard part and then you can go even on a street that has sidewalks all the way along it. You go one block up and then there won't be a sidewalk. And some of the streets in Helena, because it's such an old city, are really, the streets are narrow. So then you have cars parked on it and it's not safe to navigate on the road. So there's that issue.
And so that's the walking part of a small town. And not that Helena is the same as every small town, but if you live in another small town in Montana, you might be very similar situation.
Yeah.
What about other forms of transportation in just like rural areas that we live in?
That's where it gets even more difficult, unfortunately. So, walking is only part of it. You can only walk so far in Helena because of lack of sidewalks. So then the thing is, you have to rely on public transportation or Ubers and Lyfts. Ubers and Lyfts are not realistic because in our town, there's not enough people using them. So there's not enough drivers. So the price is high. For me to go 2 miles to work, it costs me usually between $10 to $11 pre-tip. So I take the public transit, and the problem with public transit is that their hours to begin with are minimal. It runs from 6:30 in the morning to 6 at night, Monday through Friday. So there's no weekend hours. And then they're constantly understaffed. So like, for instance, right now they have 5 drivers when they're supposed to have 15. So getting a ride is difficult.
And is there a standard in our I don't use the public transit here, but is there, my other form that's not a vehicle driving is active transportation. I'll either walk or ride a bike. not accessible to all people. But
Yes.
it is a choice that some people get to make.
Yes.
But is there a standard route, or are the routes, is it like a call? Is it kind of more like a rideshare situation where you got to call?
That is an excellent question, Kona. So the hard aspect of it is it used to be that the city of Helena had a standard route, which they called a fixed route, which is what you would envision in your head when you think of public transit and buses.
Show up at the bus stop, picks you up,
Yes.
it goes a route and you get off and then finish your travels whichever way you need to go.
Yes, and it runs on a set schedule, so you know that it runs to this bus stop every 15 minutes, or insert ratio here. And then they had a paratransit. What that does is it goes curb to curb. So it goes from your house to whatever destination you want to go to within the city of Helena. They recently changed it to being curb to curb for all of Helena, for, the non-disabled community. And they did away with the fixed route. So the nice thing of the previous system is that as somebody with a disability, I had the paratransit if it was a part of town where the fixed route didn't come anywhere near it, or the weather is really inclement. But if it was hard to get a ride on there, or the timeline just didn't work out well, I could take the fixed route. And I had that always as a backup. I could always hop on that, and I knew exactly what time I was going to get there. The thing with the paratransit is you have a 1 hour window of where they can drop you off. For instance, to come to record this podcast, I didn't even tell you this, Kona. I got dropped off 30 minutes early. And so I just waited there was a nice little seating area in the front.
I didn't know that.
I didn't want to bother you. And I know you're so nice that you would have said no bother, come in.
Yeah. What the heck?
But the thing is that's the game you have to play. And so with a paratransit is you have a 1 hour.
Oh, so I'm feeling blushing now.
You're fine. It wasn't your fault. It was a decision I made. And so anyways, you can get dropped off really early. Mm-hmm. The other part is when you're leaving somewhere, you have to guess what time you're going to leave. And so now that it's paratransit.
And actually, this is something we talked about. Yes. We already worked this out when I invited you over here, is that I said I could give you a ride afterward because we didn't know when we would end. Yeah. So I was like, I don't mind giving you a ride, but but getting a ride, being able to have transportation yourself, the part of that that's important, and it kind of goes along with, we had this Week Without Driving campaign that we were part of a few weeks ago. It's the part of it that's important is the independence for someone to be able to go somewhere when they want, but also leave when they want. You don't have to, like in this case, I'm happy to give you a ride, but it is an ask of someone else. There's social equity that can feel like, well, should I ask or should I not? Or, and it's limiting. It limits someone's independence.
Yeah, 100%. And that's the part is it's annoying to show up 30 minutes early. I wish I didn't have to deal with that, but
I'm gonna throw an idea out there for the city of Helena. If you're listening, get some legit buses and run them up and down Montana Avenue from the North Valley up to the Capitol. 15 minutes every 15 minutes, and maybe there's a loop that goes downtown. Maybe there's a loop, a couple of spurs, but let's see that happen, because that would be you got houses, you got grocery stores, you got healthcare. You got the feed store, you got Target, you got all the things people go to and engage with along that main stretch. So, see, Helen, if you're listening, let's get some buses running up and down Montana Avenue at the very least.
Agreed. The original system was a better system. So, and it's more realistic. You're going to have staff issues. So if you're doing curb to curb for everybody, when you have a staff issue, that issue becomes monumental. If you're doing a fixed route, you can maintain that with a couple drivers. It's not, as big of an issue. So, and it allows me the opportunity to, if I'm leaving somewhere, I can walk down to the bus route and know I have that controlled variable of knowing when I'm going to leave. Mm-hmm. I don't have that stressor of, I get my hair cut. Well, I have to guess how long it's going to take me and then, book it. Cause you can't book a same day ride realistically. You're allowed to, but they're going to all be gone. So yes, I agree, Kona. Great idea. Let's make it happen.
This conversation has been great. Thank you for sharing your experience about transportation here, transportation in other cities, and for sharing about the rallies in San Francisco. That's great. Thanks for listening to the Disability Rights Montana podcast. And thank you, Jacob, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
If you have any other interest in supporting our transportation efforts to increase the diversity of transportation in the state of Montana, please let us know. Thanks for joining us today. And thanks again, Jacob, for being here.